Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Behind the Headlines, and in this programme we'll be discussing what Israel's Defence Minister Gallant has said, that last week has been the toughest week in Hezbollah's history since the terror organisation was founded back in 1982. We've seen that devastating pagers and walkie-talkies have exploded, taking out over 4,000 Hezbollah terror operatives. And we'll be asking, is the hand of God against Hezbollah? Reagan, it's great to see you on this week's Behind the Headline after what has been an extraordinary week in which we've seen that Hezbollah has really been rocked to its foundations with so many explosions and so many attacks against its leadership. They're in total disarray.
Well, indeed, Simon, and it was just following last week's Behind the Headlines that all of this began to kick off, and I remember we were exchanging messages and thought, this is truly incredible. It's the stuff of spy novels, it's the stuff of fiction. If you were to write it down actually and present it as a film script, I imagine that some people would turn it down because it seems too implausible. What we've seen is nothing but catastrophic for Hezbollah and its operatives. Southern Lebanon and this Iranian regime proxy that is the terror organization of Hezbollah has been dealt this devastating blow to its military and terrorism capabilities. Its communication system was sabotaged when their pagers blew up, killing 23 and injuring over 4,000 suspected terrorists. I mean, the numbers have varied. There are quite a few numbers and different numbers involving deaths. I've seen some say that a great deal more died as a result. Hundreds injured in catastrophic ways, and 4,000 totally essentially incapacitated from their ability to serve.
We're also saying that could be a kind of conservative numbers. Hezbollah don't really want to reveal the full figure of those who are injured and warning. Just to let you know, we're going to show a bit of B-roll. There does have graphic content, so be aware. But I mean, what was extraordinary is the fact that firstly, we had the pages go off, that it's believed that the Mossad supplied these pages and actually planted explosives inside these pages because Hezbollah felt that the Israelis were monitoring their kind of their mobile phones, so they couldn't communicate. So they're looking for a new way to communicate with their terror network. And then the following day, walkie-talkies were hit. So if you were a member of Hezbollah, you wouldn't want to pick up your mobile phone, you wouldn't want to open a laptop, you wouldn't even want to put your television set on of fear of an Israeli reprisal. But the fact is, when it's saying about 4,000 injured, I mean, many of these terrorists had wounds to their hands because the pages went off. They picked up the pages and literally the pages exploded in their hands, suffering incredible eye damage as well. So essentially, Israel could have done like a whole week of targeted military airstrikes against Hezbollah positions and not have taken out over 4,000 Hezbollah terrorists.
And they have done these sorts of precise attacks, but this was so much more precise. I mean, there's one leaked, purportedly leaked Hezbollah intelligence document that talked about the damage from the pager explosions. As we've already said, it's difficult to know fully what all is authentic and what is not, but this came from a reputable source saying that 879 Hezbollah terrorists are suspected to have died as a result of the pager blast, with 291 in some form of seniority included, or in addition to that. Again, the figures are a little unspecific. 509 blinded, because the nature, some of the pagers apparently had a beeping that was going as like a form of alert. One of the working theories is, due to some of the injuries looked at and seen as well, is that the terrorists would have picked up the pager, seen this error code coming through or whatever, pressed the button, which would have self-detonated essentially on the pager. 1,735 injured in the reproductive organs, and 613 experiencing permanent function damage. And this is the one from that it's purported to be a leaked Hezbollah intelligence document on that after.
Well, I won't ask how you got hold of that, but yeah, it's very interesting. Let's also give you a context of also what happened last week. So the next day, the terror organization was dealt another deadly blow when their walkie-talkies exploded, killing and injuring more operatives. This was followed by an Israeli airstrike taking out 150 missile sites in southern Lebanon. And then we saw Ibrahim Aqil, the head of Hezbollah's military operations, number 2 in Hezbollah, was assassinated with other top Hezbollah top commanders.
The original generation of Hezbollah commanders has been completely eradicated now. There are no more of the original old guard of senior command who are in control, which is impressive in and of itself. Israel has done something incredibly clinical in carrying out this operation. And the government, of course, believes that the leadership of Hezbollah were planning to carry out an October 7th style terror attack against Israel. And we've talked about this in the past year, Simon, how there was overlap, and it seems that potentially there was meant to be a coordinated effort, that there was meant to be something happening on perhaps not October the 7th, but on another day where Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran itself carried out some form of joint operation. Of course, immediately following October the 7th, we see Hezbollah, while congratulating, saying, no, this was all Hamas's doing, but the reality of intelligence had for months been pointing to something brewing.
And they were preparing something big.
Absolutely.
They were preparing for an invasion of Galilee, and they're preparing to launch hundreds, if not thousands, of rockets and missiles at Israel and then launch an invasion. We also see, for example, that the Islamic Republic of Iran and Hezbollah were preparing for an apocalyptic missile and rocket attack with thousands of rockets and missiles to attack Israel, followed by a ground invasion of the Galilee. In the past week, we've witnessed a turning point in the war where Israel has regained the strategic initiative and dealt a deadly blow to their enemies. We also see that famous Mossad operations in the past, such as the 1961 capture of Adolf Eichmann in Argentina and then taken to Israel for trial. We also saw that was in 1961, and then we saw the incredible Mossad operation against the Palestinian terrorists who took part in the Munich massacre in 1972, belonging to Black September, and all of those who were involved in killing those Israeli athletes were taken out by Mossad in 72. And then in 2021, we see that a bomb was planted inside a table that made its way into the Iranian nuclear facility in Natanz and blew up that nuclear site. So what we see is this alleged Mossad operation using these walkie-talkies as explosive has to go down as one of the greatest operatives in the history of the Mossad.
Without doubt. Since October the 8th of 2023 until the 22nd of September, we've seen, according to the Israeli embassy in London, Hezbollah launching 8,800 rockets into Israel, wounding 325, murdering 48, and 190 million square meters have been burnt, with 63,500 civilians evacuated due to the displacement over the fear of it. And we even back in January would have met many people who had been evacuated already from the north. This has been an ongoing fiasco, and it's become one of the primary wartime goals of the Netanyahu government to ensure that those who had to evacuate are able to return and live securely in the north.
Yep. And let's take us back to that evil day known as the Black Sabbath, which was October the 7th. So on October the 8th, 2023, one day after the outbreak of the war, Hezbollah began launching Katyusha rockets, mortar rockets, anti-tank missiles, drones into the narrow strip of Israel's north. At first targeting military installations, then the organization began to strike civilian border settlements, and the entire Israeli border population was evacuated. And last week, Israel struck hard against the Islamist terrorist organization Hezbollah in Lebanon, in what the Israeli Defense Minister Gallant described as the worst week in Hezbollah's history since its founding back in 1982.
And it's widely believed that Mossad has been behind this deadly pager and walkie-talkie attack against Hezbollah in their terror organization. It's one of the most successful, sophisticated operations carried out by any security network or force, let alone it has to be the most sophisticated carried out by Israel. This is something of epic proportions on a biblical scale. Right, it's massive.
So the big question is, and this is the question for the program, are we seeing the wrath of God being waged against Hezbollah? And I kind of believe we are, because the momentum of this war has changed. Israel was very much on the defensive. Israel facing a two-front war, essentially in the south against Hamas in Gaza, and then in the north with Hezbollah. And Hezbollah poses a much greater threat, terror threat and military threat than Hamas. And Hezbollah is the jewel in the crown of the Iranian regime. So at all costs, they want to preserve their international terror organization that has a global reach, and to take out so many of its leaders, to take out so many Hezbollah terrorists, has really put this terror organization at a complete strategic disadvantage, and really has damaged their terrorism and military capabilities.
Well, this is also a massive psychological warfare move, because what seems to have happened is Hezbollah had been convinced somehow that they needed to change their communication systems. Mossad easily able to track mobile phone networks. Hezbollah is somehow convinced we need to get pagers. And this is where I think, Simon, that there's actually quite a few inside men involved at Hezbollah.
There have to be.
There has to be.
Without a doubt.
In this case, there's loads of double agents, I'm sure. Also, we have to remember that the Lebanese populace hates Hezbollah by and large, and it's been under its thumb and is facing economic devastation and ruin in so many ways. But what we see is they're convinced to buy pagers, and there's always a little bit of question as to the exact details of it, but best as can be surmised, a shell company is set up in Hungary, and this company has devices that they purchased from Asia, which
they're the intermediaries. They're the ones that sold them to Singapore, and then the Singapore company then sold them on to Hezbollah. But this was, I think, the latest news I've read as well, is that this company that was the factory where they produced these pagers was only established in 2022.
And its office, no one is in, no one is responding. There is one person who has denied the claim but cannot be contacted, and no one knows who she is, mysterious woman. And so all of these different, very, very interesting links being made, and some of them leading down to dead ends. But very, very definitely, this is what seems to have occurred. The idea is that certain levels of explosive were placed in these pagers. There's question in regard to some of the walkie-talkies, because a little bit confusing is that some of these devices were purportedly 10 years old. So there's some question mark as to, okay, what about older devices? Is there something that Mossad has done with frequency? What's going on here? But that's part of the psychological game.
Absolutely.
And they've done this expertly.
I'm going to have to wait for a few years for the movie to come out.
Yeah.
So according to the Times of Israel, the Israeli spy agency planted a quantity of PETN, which is a highly explosive material, on the batteries of devices and detonated them by raising the temperature of the batteries from afar, one source says. The Wall Street Journal reported earlier that some Hezbollah members felt their pages heating up and disposed of them before the series of explosions that killed at least 9 and injured about 2,800 people. It says each of the pages that exploded in the possession of their Hezbollah owners across Lebanon on Tuesday injured thousands of the terror group's operatives who individually detonated, with the attackers knowing who was being targeted, their location, and whether others were in close proximity, according to a Saturday evening television report. In a lengthy report quoting Israeli and foreign sources, Israel's Channel 12 News said that those behind the attacks were determined to ensure that not only the person carrying the device would be hurt by the blast, but each pager had its own arrangements. That's how it was possible to control who was hit and who wasn't. The report quoted an unnamed foreign security source. And the Jerusalem Republic Affairs, under this title, The Epic Attack on Hezbollah Terrorists Across Lebanon, says that Hezbollah's aim admits that the pager attack attributed to Israel was exceptional and proves intelligence and technological superiority. The organisation claimed that through a journalist close to it, that Israel had changed the rules of the game because it harms civilians, and that we are now facing a new situation. Then on September the 18th, 2024, the Lebanese newspaper Al Akhbar, Hezbollah's mouthpiece, published a front-page headline proclaiming "Killing Without Borders." An article written by a senior journalist, Ibrahim Aqil, a close associate of the Hezbollah Secretary General Hassan Nasrallah, admits that Israel carried out an extraordinary military operation against Hezbollah, taking advantage of its intelligence and technical advantage. It claimed that more than 3,000 Hezbollah fighters and Lebanese civilians were wounded in the operation. So let's have a look now at this excellent CBN News report on one of the greatest operatives carried out by an intelligence agency in the 21st century.
Communications devices belonging to Hezbollah terrorists blew up in a second day of explosions on Wednesday. This attack targeting walkie-talkies after thousands of pagers were remotely detonated the day before. The Wednesday blasts killing more than 30 people and wounding 450. Hezbollah blames Israel for the explosions and says the Jewish nation will pay. At the same time, Israel says it thwarted an Iranian plot to assassinate its top leaders. Officials announcing the arrest of an Israeli citizen who had twice been smuggled into Iran and paid to promote missions to kill Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and other senior figures. This as Israel is shifting more resources for potential military action against Hezbollah. The IDF's 98th Division is being sent from Gaza to the northern border. Middle East analyst David Daoud told CBN's Faith Nation that diplomatic efforts have failed to end Hezbollah's threat.
What seems to remain is some kind of military action to push Hezbollah back from the border, to degrade its military capabilities. And I think we're starting to see the Israelis shift into that posture.
Always grateful to our friends at CBN for their efficiency in reporting. Now, this operation has severely damaged Hezbollah's standing. It's humiliated Hassan Nasrallah, its leader, who is now under extreme pressure to restore the group's tarnished image. I highly doubt that that's going to be possible. And the Israeli strike highlighting both the intelligence penetration of Hezbollah and the ingenuity of Israeli operations, reportedly involving the smuggling of foreign-made pagers secretly fitted with explosives. The successful strike temporarily crippled Hezbollah's command and control infrastructure, dealing a significant blow to its operational capacity and morale. Lebanon, already struggling economically, now faces further conflict, with civilians fearing an all-out war that could devastate the country. Indeed, thousands are already leaving that border area. To plant small bombs in pagers and walkie-talkies meant saving the lives of thousands of Lebanese civilians, and at the same time has taken out 4,000 of the elite Hezbollah terrorists, including the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon. So,
which has blinded him. So
truly, and someone said the irony of this is that there's this individual, the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon. Also, it's quite common in Iran when some of the women are, that they don't follow the hijab rules or they're disrespectful in some way. One of the punishments is to be blinded in one of their eyes. And so this has been a big campaign point by many Iranian women. So ironic, is it not, that this has happened to the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon.
So on Thursday last week, the Sunday Times reports that Hezbollah is a trap between a hawk and a dove. This is the titles. Israel wants to increase the pain. So after the devastating pager and walkie-talkie attack, the Israeli Air Force unleashed a heavy wave of airstrikes across southern Lebanon to take out 150 of Hezbollah launch sites. The Times of Israel also reported that over the weekend on Saturday, the IDF carried out a wave of airstrikes against some 400 Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, including rocket launchers. The IDF spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, said on a Saturday evening in a press conference with the army, saying that it identified preparations by the terror group to launch a major rocket attacks against Israel. They say that some 100 rockets were launched from Lebanon at northern Israel on Saturday, according to the IDF. And of course, what we're seeing now is an increasingly fast developing situation. And we know from last night that Hezbollah again fired rockets and missiles into the Galilee and also at Haifa. And of course, Israel went then onto a national state emergency as its third biggest city was targeted, and it's also Israel's major port as well.
The Times of Israel reports eliminating multiple top Hezbollah commanders in Friday's Beirut strike. Red One Force leadership has been taken out, with Hezbollah acknowledging 2 top leaders, 14 others dying in the attack that killed head of operations Ibrahim Aqil, and Lebanon has said that the overall death toll is 37. The Israeli Defense Forces confirmed on Saturday that it's eliminated many of the top commanders of Hezbollah's Red One Force in the Friday strike, and they've acknowledged that the airstrike killed 2 of its most senior commanders, 14 other members of the terror group who were meeting in the basement of this Beirut residential building. The devastating strike was further blow to the Iranian proxy terror group and brought the sides closer to a full-scale war. Although I have to say, Simon, definition of full-scale war, I guess we're talking about invasion here, but we've been seeing thousands of rockets rain on Israel from Hezbollah for the past year with a minimal amount of response. Hezbollah has had many opportunities to step back from the brink. They have continued to escalate. Much of the international community has ignored the thousands of rockets that Hezbollah has been firing on northern Israel, and has been talking about Israel's responsibility to ease off a little bit. But there comes a point in time, and that point in time has been reached, wherein justice has to be meted out. And the day of mercy and forbearance and patience on Hezbollah's terror cell and their commanders is over. It's now time to clear the map of them.
And also the fact that now that Hezbollah are actually firing rockets and missiles into Haifa will only increase that retaliatory action on behalf of the Israeli Air Force. I mean, the fact is that the Israelis have certainly taken out the key leadership within Hezbollah. I think only Nasrallah is next to actually take out, and we are seeing the enemy's plans just literally blow up in their face. If I can use that pun, with the walkie-talkies and with the pages, is exactly what's happened, as we'll unpack it later. But it's important as well to remind ourselves who are Hezbollah, and this is thanks to our friends both at the Israeli Foreign Ministry and the Israeli Defense Force.
Hezbollah, an Iranian-backed terrorist organization, poses a significant threat to Israel's security, as well as to the security of many Western democracies. With estimates of up to 100,000 fighters, including commando units with combat experience from Syria, Hezbollah's reach extends across borders, Their arsenal boasts 150,000 to 200,000 rockets and missiles, with hundreds of high-precision, highly destructive weapons. Supported by Shiite militants from neighboring countries like Syria and Iraq, Hezbollah's weaponry includes surface-to-air missiles, sophisticated ballistic missiles, and advanced attack drones. Hezbollah's growing arsenal and advanced capabilities underscore the urgent need for coordinated international action to address the threat. Hezbollah is a threat to global security. They must be stopped.
This is Southern Lebanon. There are dozens of Lebanese villages along approximately 80 kilometers of the border with Israel. For over 20 years, Hezbollah has deployed its arms, such as cruise missiles, rockets, launchers, and explosive UAVs inside civilian homes hidden behind the Lebanese population. Let's look at an example that we identified a few weeks ago. This is a Russian-made DR-3 cruise missile hidden inside of a home. The IDF identified the terrorists making an opening in the building that exposed the missile. We are monitoring these activities, locating the weapons and eliminating them with precise intelligence-based strikes. The IDF is operating and will continue to operate in defense of the citizens of Israel wherever required.
This week's special guest joining us on Behind Headlines is joining us all the way from Israel. He is Stefan Silva. He's a Messianic Jewish leader and also a reservist in the IDF. Stefan, warm welcome to Behind Headlines, and it's so good to see you again.
Thank you, Simon. It's great to be with you.
And Stefan, do you want to just give us an update? Because after the horrors of October the 7th, you were called up from the reserve duty. Just share with us your experience of being called up on behalf of the Israeli Defense Force to defend Israel after the most horrific mass terrorist attack in the nation's history.
Yeah, October 7th, as we call it here in Israel, is known as the Black Sabbath. Definitely caught everybody here by surprise. My family and I, we were having a holiday breakfast that morning when we heard of everything that was going on, and within a very short period of time, an hour, 2 hours, I had my bags packed, and I was on my way up to the northern border with Lebanon. The attack came from Gaza. It was very clear at the beginning, but the concern that was what was taking place was actually a coordinated attack from multiple fronts. What we call here in Israel, or what the military and the government calls the convergence of arenas, something that had been spoken about, for many months and even years beforehand by senior security officials, politicians, experts, that, these fronts, Hamas in the south and Gaza, Hezbollah in the north and Lebanon, the Iranian proxies in the Golan Heights in Syria, and then Iran far out east, possibly the Houthis down in the south. All of this would create a circle of fire around Israel, which is what eventually did happen. So I was called up to the northern border, where from the following day, October 8th, Hezbollah commenced unprovoked attacks against Israel, against the towns, against the civilians and the citizens of Israel. And so basically for a number of months, I was there ongoing, about 7 months in that, which received a lot less headlines over the months compared to Gaza, and understandably so, because that's where the focus was. But very, very clearly since last week, that focus has moved now to the north, to Hezbollah, and that's basically what we see happening in front of us right now.
Now, Stefan, you fought with the IDF in southern Lebanon all the way back in the Second Lebanon War back in 2006. Share with us what kind of enemy Hezbollah are in comparison to Hamas.
Yeah, so the Hezbollah of 2024 obviously is very different than the Hezbollah of 2006. The organization, or the terror group, I should call them, has definitely advanced, grown, strengthened, become a lot more organized, a lot more, armed to the teeth with all kinds of munitions, which we've seen being used over the past 11 months. If it's suicide drones, more advanced missiles, and various other types of munitions. I think that Hamas, on the eve of the war, on the eve of October 7th, meaning on October 6, 2023, before they commenced their surprise attack against Israel on that Black Sabbath morning, I think that they would have been, as a terror group, Hamas would have been closer to what Hezbollah was 20 years ago, or almost 20 years ago, back in 2006. That's kind of my sense in general. Maybe not even that, meaning Hamas has grown as well significantly over the past 10, 15 years to become a well-organized terror group. But even then, Hamas is not, or was not, as organized, as strong, as armed as what even Hezbollah was back in 2006. Obviously, right now, Hamas is completely dismantled as an organized fighting force, and that's where they are right now. Hezbollah is a completely different story, and it's very clear to everyone, and it has been all along, that Hezbollah is the greater threat. Was even last year before this all began, and definitely is now in the current situation where we find ourselves.
And Stefan, what do you make of the extraordinary events that occurred last week in Lebanon? The fact that all these Hezbollah pages went off together with these walkie-talkies with the small explosives that were put in these devices, that's effectively taken out 4,000 Hezbollah terrorists, and it's being credited that Mossad took part in this operation. Share with us the impact that this will have on Hezbollah's terrorism and military capabilities.
Yeah, so I doubt that even Ian Fleming's and James Bond could have come up with such a daring and thought-defying scenario. Here there was, Israel obviously hasn't taken any responsibility for that act. And so there was kind of these jokes going on here on the radio that maybe it was Luxembourg or San Marino or some other nation that did this. But whatever nation it was, obviously it's just incredible what has happened. Israel always has to be thinking 3, 4, 10 steps ahead. Always has to be calculating what is going to be happening, how things are going to develop in the future. The eye is always scanning to see what kind of threats are developing, what kind of munitions are being developed. We saw that back with the Syrian nuclear plant that was, being clandestinely built in Syria and taken out by the IAF. Israel just can't allow itself to be caught off guard. And October 7th was a stark reminder of what happens when we get caught off guard. Israel is the most significant resource that Israel has is the human resource. That is the main resource that has caused Israel to be the startup nation that many people see it to be in terms of technology. And obviously that spills over and affects also or shows its fruit in the defense agencies as well, through operations like we saw, which were years in the making and just waiting for that right moment of being set up and then set off, and have the completely dismantling effect that it has had. From what I'm hearing, it's had a very, very significant effect in Hezbollah. It was a real, I wouldn't say it was a knockout, but it was close to that. It has really caught Hezbollah off balance and knocked them out of balance completely. As you said, within a moment, hundreds, thousands were of Hezbollah terrorists and operatives in mainly the middle level of operatives and officers, and even up to the higher ranking operator or terrorists and officers were taken out. And that obviously not only affected the actual personnel who were killed or who were wounded and were incapacitated, but it has also completely destroyed, you could say, Hezbollah's means of communication. And just back in February, Nasrallah had warned his people to stop using their mobile phones because of Israel's ability to track and to listen on to conversations or into conversations through their phones. And so he essentially set the ground for using these pages, these beepers, And now that is being completely taken out, along with their walkie-talkies and other means of communication. And when things like that happen, it forces it's basically forcing Hezbollah to use other means of communication, whether it's in person, whether it's phones, means that creates probably a lot more intelligence signals, you could say. And then obviously that intel is going to be surfaced, and Israel is using that in order to continue to hit Hezbollah. And the classic example of that is the strike against Ibrahim Aqil, the number 2 in Hezbollah, on Friday, the strike that took him out, and the top or senior leadership, military leadership of the Radwan force as well. Another very, very significant blow to Hezbollah.
Now, President Isaac Herzog has said in an interview on Sky News that Hezbollah are preparing for a massive invasion of northern Israel and the capture of the Galilee, and they were aiming to carry out their own October the 7th, with them also firing thousands of missiles. We've been seeing this into Israel. Share with us how horrific this would have been if Hezbollah had achieved this strategic objective.
Yeah, so like I said, Ibrahim Aqil and the leader of the Radwan unit, who was taken out on Friday along with the senior leadership of that unit, they were meeting together, like President Herzog said, they were meeting together in order to plan the execution of or to execute the plan that they had to conquer the Galilee. That was the name of the operation. Now, obviously, if anything like that were to happen on the northern border with Hezbollah, I believe it would be a lot more horrific than what we would have seen in Gaza. Now, I think if that had happened before October 7th, it would have been very, very horrific, terrible. If that were to happen today, it would look slightly different, probably not as bad as what it would have looked back then, because most of the towns and the villages are vacant of citizens, so there's not a lot of people there, and there's a very strong military force now on the northern border, which wasn't there on the eve of October 7th. So there's a big question as to how successful they would have been, but obviously if this had happened beforehand, which was the understanding that this was going to happen. We had trained for 2 years prior to October 7th, and even before that, for this exact scenario. Basically, exactly what Hamas did in Gaza was what Hezbollah planned to do on the northern border. And, Hamas really stole their thunder in that sense, and it was clear afterwards that this was not coordinated between Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran. So Hamas really stole Hezbollah's thunder, but had that happened on the northern border before October 7th, it would have been absolutely horrific, absolutely terrible. If it was to happen today, it wouldn't be so bad, but there still would be a psychological effect of Hezbollah infiltrating Israel and taking over certain areas within Israel, even if it was just one town or one outpost, and even if it was for a limited amount of time until Israel could push them back, it still would have an effect on the nation and the morale.
And Stefan, your defense minister, the Israeli defense minister, Gallant, said last week that last week was the worst week in Hezbollah's history since it was established in 1982. Are we seeing the wrath of God coming against Hezbollah? And are we also seeing God's divine protection at play in thwarting this mass terrorist attack and rockets attack, that Israel now seems to have the upper hand against this vile and evil terrorist organization?
Yeah, I think I would be a little bit careful with describing it as the wrath of God being poured out on Hezbollah. There's no doubt that God is sovereign, and everything that happens, he is in control. He's the keeper of Israel. Everything that is happening on the Israeli side and on the Lebanon Hezbollah side is under his complete control and according to his plan. I think that's what we as believers believe in. And by no doubt, it's by God's grace that Israel was able to prepare for this war with Hezbollah long before October 7th. just as Hezbollah has been preparing for this moment up until now, since the Second Lebanon War in 2006, Israel has also been preparing for this war since 2006, because everybody knew and realized that it was only a matter of time until it was going to happen again. I think, by God's grace, the IDF has learned and pivoted from the failures that led to the Black Sabbath, the attacks of October 7th, especially from an intelligence point of view. And I think all of those things together have led to the continual blows that Hezbollah is experiencing now, which is a combination of the precise intel along with the lethal and aggressive military force, mainly coming from the Air Force at the moment, but not only. This war is with Hezbollah is only really beginning. We don't know how long it's going to last for. It could be, a couple of weeks. It could be, again, a couple of months or even longer than that. And we don't know what is going to happen in the future. All it takes really is one missile to penetrate the missile defense system and hit a building with people in it, and we could be looking at hundreds or thousands of casualties in a moment as well. So God is with us. The Lord is fighting with Israel. I think it's a complex situation that we are still going through, and we don't see the end of it yet. And within that, we also realize that God is wanting to turn Israel back to himself, but also pour out judgment upon the nations who attempt to destroy Israel and who attempt to prevent what it is that he is doing in the world today. And that all really does focus in on the nation of Israel and the land of Israel.
Stefan, we just want to thank you so much for joining us on Behind the Headlines today. You've done a great job. So Shana Tova, Happy New Year to you and your family. Please send our love also to your father as well, David Silver, a great man of God. And we just really thank you for the inspirational update that you've given us, and just let you know that you're in our thoughts and you're in our prayers, particularly at this very dangerous moment in Israel's history.
Thanks so much, Simon. Really appreciate it.
So many may be wondering why exactly now has Israel chosen to continue this onslaught in such an escalated way against Hezbollah, and that's because of new intelligence that shows that Hezbollah, sponsored of course as usual by Iran, was planning a massive invasion of northern Israel, which would have had catastrophic impact on many of the civilian populated regions there, including Haifa.
Yeah, so if we remember what Hamas did on October the 7th, they launched an unparalleled rocket and missile attack onto Israel first, and then the sirens went off, Israelis ran to the bomb shelters, then that was followed by the invasion. So they were going to carry out the same sort of attack, but there's an extremely interesting article that was published back in July by the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Do you want to tell our viewers about it?
Yeah, so Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs published this article under the heading, What's Behind the Latest Iranian Threat to Destroy Israel. In the Israeli security establishment, the Iranian threat is taken seriously. While not new, it does appear Iran is closer to deciding on entering a regional war to support Hezbollah, a step it has avoided until now. Senior Israeli security officials are highly concerned about Iran's recent threat to wage a war of annihilation against Israel on multiple fronts, including directly from Iran, should Israel launch a full-scale war against Hezbollah in Lebanon. Although Iran's threats to destroy Israel are not new, Israeli and American assessments previously believed that Iran was not interested in a regional war. The current rhetoric from Iran suggests a shift toward a confrontation with Israel, bolstering the argument that Israel is an existential struggle. The Iranian announcement took regional players and the Biden administration by surprise, with Israeli intelligence having varied assessments regarding what prompted Iran to make this threat now. One perspective has suggested that Iran is emboldened by the results of its direct attack on Israel on April the 14th of 2024, during which it launched over 300 ballistic missiles and drones at Israel. While virtually no weapon made it through defenses, Iran may have learned several lessons. Israel struggled to handle this attack independently and required assistance from an international coalition led by the United States to defend against this unprecedented assault. Iran's message is clear. It will not abandon its ally Hezbollah and will prevent Israel from inflicting significant damage on it, especially after Hezbollah has significantly bolstered military power since the 2006 war. And what's happening here, Simon, really is there's all of this context behind what's going on, but the idea is that in the imminent future, Hezbollah was going to be launching, there was intelligence, concrete intelligence, that they were going to be launching a total war on the north in Israel.
And also I think the Iranians actually believed, as well as according to that report, that Israel was fighting for its very existence and that the Jewish state was extremely weak and vulnerable, and this was their chance to destroy Israel. And also what comes to mind as well is the fact that the Iranians will be extremely upset about the attack, Israeli attack on Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is their prized possession. It's their jewel in their crown. This is their terror organization they've spent a fortune on. They've spent money training and equipping. And if Israel is able to take out Hezbollah, then there's nothing now to stop Israel going into Iran to take out the Iranian nuclear sites and preventing Iran from becoming a nuclear power with nuclear weapons. And this was their safety policy against Israel. Now, it was very interesting watching the Joe Rosenberg report on TBN. He has his own program called the Rosenberg Report. On this YouTube video entitled God Supernaturally Thwarting Iran. He says that Iran is threatened to launch thousands of missiles and suicide drones into Israel, putting Israel on the highest defensive alert. He says that 10 million Israeli citizens are trying to go about their daily lives under the threat of a full-scale attack and a new regional war. He says the head of Hezbollah, Nasrallah, has vowed to attack Israel with no mercy, and a few weeks ago Hezbollah put 6,000 missiles onto their launch pads, and they were set to launch them at Tel Aviv, and they were going to fire them on a particular Sunday morning between 5 and 5:30 a.m. But the Israeli intelligence became aware of the attack. Then Israel launched 100 fighter aircrafts in a preemptive strike against the launching sites and completely destroyed them. And also we found as well intelligence coming to emerge that Hezbollah were also preparing for a ground invasion of the Galilee.
And the IDF said that Wabi, who was assassinated on Friday, was among those involved in the planning of a Hezbollah invasion of the Galilee, and was also part of an advancing Hezbollah's entrenchment in southern Lebanon while attempting to improve the organization's ground combat capabilities. Over the years and during the first months of the war, the military said that Wabi was involved in planning and carrying out rocket fire and infiltration attacks. Signifying his stature in Hezbollah, Wabi was identified by the terror group as a commander, with Hezbollah rarely referring to senior operatives slain in Israeli strikes as commanders. President Isaac Herzog said on Sunday that a Beirut gathering last week of top Hezbollah commanders that was bombed by Israel was convened to plan an attack on Israel like the devastating October the 7th assault by the Palestinian terror group Hamas. The assertion matched media reports about the meeting and came the day after the IDF forces confirmed that it eliminated many of the top commanders of Hezbollah's elite Radwan force in a Friday airstrike, collapsing the building where the meeting was being held.
And during the interview with Sky News, President Herzog said the following. He said, all of these leaders were meeting to launch the same horrific, hideous attack that we had on October the 7th by Hamas, by burning Israelis, butchering them, raping their women, taking hostages, old people and little babies, Herzog said. Hezbollah has also been planning a similar attack for years, the evil empire of Iran. And then we also have the IDF spokesman, Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, say the following on Friday. He said that, that the meeting in Beirut, they met to coordinate terror activities against Israel, civilians, with an attack into northern territory of the state of Israel and what they called the plan to conquer the Galilee. Now, I've been aware of this particular plan for a number of years, and this is why, for example, Hezbollah built a number of very sophisticated tunnels in southern Lebanon. And the differences between Gaza and southern Lebanon, Gaza's sand, but in southern Lebanon is rock. So they built these concrete, sophisticated tunnels where they were planning to launch a similar devastating attack to October the 7th. And I think the Israelis felt that this was imminent, that now was the time to strike. But if Hezbollah had launched those thousands of rockets and missiles, the damage it could have done on Israel, overwhelming Israel's Iron Dome system, Israel's financial capital, Tel Aviv would have come under a hit. The whole country would have been paralyzed. And really, I think what we're seeing, Reagan, is literally the wrath of God being poured out upon Hezbollah, because we know in Genesis 12, 1-3, that I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. We're seeing that Hezbollah and their Iranian sponsors have been cursing Israel. They have been shedding innocent Israeli blood. And of course, what we've now seen is nothing but a miracle in terms of not only protecting Israel from this horrendous missile and terrorism attack, but also then to virtually take out the entire leadership of Hezbollah as a terror organization. It's nothing less than an absolute miracle.
It truly is, Simon, and the reality of the impact that the IDF has made on Hezbollah at this moment is really, really incredible, because if you consider 4,000 terrorists taken out.
Well, the number that you gave us was even higher.
Well, so there would be still about 4,000 incapacitated in some way across the board of death and injury, but you're looking at 879 that this report claims to have been killed. But then even just in the past few days, this is a constantly developing story. Just in the past couple of days, we've had in airstrikes others killed. And so what Israel is doing is it's showing it knows where everyone is. And the question is, okay, what about Nasrallah? Look, I think I'm confident that Mossad, I'm confident that the IDF knows exactly where Nasrallah is, and that it's biding its time, it's giving its warnings, it is potentially trying to avoid a power vacuum that could see even more instability and somehow it's hard to imagine someone worse coming in, but it's wanting to contain the situation and control the situation in the best possible way that would allow for the swifter return of those who have been evacuated from the north. I believe that we're looking at, in the coming months, an assassination of Nasrallah if something doesn't change.
Well, this is such a fast-moving situation that we could see in the next few days Israel launch a kind of ground offensive against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. I mean, for example, their main objective at the moment is to actually take out the rockets and missiles and launchers from southern Lebanon. I think we showed quite a few videos on there where Hezbollah are using asymmetrical warfare, planting these Russian rockets and missiles into the homes of people. And this is what Israel's been saying for a number of years now, that if you are having one of these rockets and missiles in your home, then you become a legitimate target. And of course, this is again the terror organization using asymmetrical warfare, hiding behind innocent Lebanese civilians in order to carry out horrific terrorist attacks. And Israel has no other choice but to destroy Hezbollah and to make those communities, I think over between 60 and 80,000 that were dispersed after the October the 8th, to be able to return safely to their homes. Israel has to deal with that threat in the north from Hezbollah.
Well, it definitely does. And, I've seen, Simon, people even in the past few days bemoaning, and I've heard people say, oh, what on earth is Netanyahu doing? Or what's going on in Lebanon, acting truly horrified of it. But this is a direct quote from a speech that Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, gave. This is in the aftermath of October the 7th. This is a quote, okay? So if any of you are inclined to think that in some way Hezbollah has a moral high ground here. Lebanon was a Christian country, Nasrallah says, but we took it and now it's ours. After we kill all the Jews in Palestine, we will just have begun. We won't stop until every country on earth is ruled by the law of Allah and the people of Islam, like our Prophet promised. This is ideologically driven. It is fully Islamic in nature, and it's right that we recognize the impact that this toxic, terror-loving ideology has. What Israel is doing is not just a blessing to its own people, it's a favor for the rest of the world.
And the West as well.
Absolutely.
Because Israel's on the front line. I mean, what's also extraordinary as well is the fact that the paranoia that will now exist amongst Hezbollah, knowing that even if they open a laptop or they put on the television that they face more explosions, the fact that their leadership has been decimated and their military and terrorism capabilities massively curtailed will come as a huge shock, as they were preparing for an all-out military offensive against Israel using thousands of rockets and missiles and invading northern Israel and taking hostages and taking the Galilee. So again, I think what we see here is God's hand of mercy and protection over Israel, particularly as it relates to Psalm 121 that says, "I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where does my help come? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not allow you to be moved. He who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep." And certainly the God of Israel is not asleep.
Well, based on the number of some of what we've been seeing in relation to the attacks from the IDF, that there's a claim that the IDF is putting out there that up to 50% of Hezbollah's stocks have been destroyed in terms of its munitions, and it could even be more than that. But regardless, we understand that Israel it's not just operating with its own might here, and this is exactly what you're just saying. There is a spiritual element to all of this. We understand that the God of Israel is the fortress of Zion, and the call for ourselves, the call for Israel, the call for all who are there is to remember and to hearken to the words of the other psalm that there in Psalm 1-4, those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which can never be moved, which endures forever. And it closes out Psalm 124 saying, "Peace be upon Israel," assuring the people there that God is its fortress, guarding all the way.
Reagan, great to do a program with you today on such an important topic, and just want to thank you for watching at home. Please continue to pray for God's protection over the nation of Israel, and we've certainly seen God's retribution being poured out upon Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and we pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So thank you for watching this week's edition of Behind the Headlines.